Reconvene to open session. Is there anything to report out, Kimberly?
There's no reportable action.
Thank you. All right, we call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember Sandu.
Here.
Councilmember Campion.
Here.
Councilmember Lozano.
Here.
Mayor Lamson.
Here. All right, flag salute and replay statement. Councilmember Lozano, will you do the flag salute after our silent?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Would you please replay the statement?
This meeting of the Galt City Council will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will air Friday, August 2nd at 9 a.m. and Saturday, August 3rd at 9 a.m. The City Council meeting videos are also archived on the city's website, and a DVD copy is available for checkout from any library branch.
All right. So taking public comment now, all of these? Or
No, only the first one.
Just the first one.
Read the public comments.
Okay.
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the City Council on non-agenda items. The public comment section is for the City Council to receive comments. Except for brief responses to questions, no discussion or action may be taken on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Please limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Speaker cards are located on the table inside the entrances to council chambers. Once completed, forward the speaker card to the clerk. Those persons wishing to speak on any items scheduled on the agenda will be given an opportunity to do so at the time that item is being considered.
All right, thank you. I have one that's not on the agenda, and that is Roberta Robbins, Park Landscaping Watering. Please come to the podium. Good evening.
I don't know if any of you have driven around our mediums on Corellia and Walnut. If you have taken a look at any of our parks, specifically Walker Park, if somebody doesn't start watering soon, the trees are dying, they're dropping their leaves. I understand you can't mow every week. I understand the budget constraint. Where's the money gonna come from to replace everything? So that's my big issue. It needs water out there badly. So somebody needs to address that. Thank you.
If it's all right with the council, I'm going to have Director Solis just make a little comment on that.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, I want to assure you that last week, myself and Armando Morales, Park Supervisor, we drove around looking at the landscaping. We made some adjustments last week. I personally drove around to every park, the majority of the landscapings. We made more adjustments this week. This is new uncharted territory for us, and we're making adjustments as we go. The Lake Canyon was one that was being underwater, so we've made adjustments there. There was a section in the Carillion Boulevard that was drying up where everything else seemed okay. We've made adjustments there, so we're continuing to take this week by week and making adjustments as we go.
Thank you. I'd also like to suggest to the public, we have our Galt Connect app where you can report things. I found a sprinkler head shooting straight up one night. I wondered why the parking lot was flooded, and so I put it on, took a picture of it, put it on the Galt app, and they were able to take care of it quite quickly. So as we water less, we're finding a lot of areas that are underwatered or the sprinklers are broken. Sometimes they're vandalized, and please put things on the Galt Connect, and we'll come take a look at it.
Can I say one other issue? He needs to walk through the dog park because it is in
Okay, thank you.
Like I said, the trees are dying, the grass is dead.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Solis, could you elaborate a little bit further, because you and I had a conversation about this, and I think this would be helpful, about some of the things you were finding. You had explained to me where, because we went from, I want you to more elaborate more, we're going to a phase 1 watering, so when you water less, you're not getting as much water. So a lot of things were getting flood irrigated before.
Yeah, so
and
what,
now, so go into that,
what
please.
happened, we found, let me use A Street for example. We're finding that all of the sprinklers are buried underneath these bushes. So when they're popping up, they're not spraying out, but when you have that water time, it would spread out as it went out. So now some of the modifications we'll be doing there is trying to put in some irrigation that we put underground. I can't remember. Drip irrigation, sorry, in those places. So we'll be making those type of modifications that are not expensive, that'll help throughout that too. So it's just not watering as much, so it's not spreading out as much. We're finding those areas that we're dealing with.
And you also told me that we were, all the watering happens at night.
Yes, it should happen after 10 PM, and then we shouldn't be watering after 6 AM. If you do see sprinklers on, one of two things is happening. We're doing an irrigation check to check for broken sprinklers, making sure the coverage is there, or timers off, something like that. There should not be any watering after 6 AM.
Okay.
You may see that at the complex this week. We had a main line break that's just been repaired, so trying to get caught up on the watering there might happen a little bit during the day.
All right, thank you so much. All right, financial sustainability plan, Parks and Recreation Fund, Lighting and Landscaping District Funds Review. Interim City Manager, Thomas Hagland.
Mayor Lamson, members of the council, good evening. Tonight is the second in a series of meetings where we will be holding this month and next, culminating in the consideration of action items by the City Council in September relative to the city's long-term financial sustainability and the need to create a financial sustainability plan. I'll be working off of a PowerPoint presentation in large measure tonight. There are a significant number of slides, and so this will be a longer presentation, but it's important in order to flesh out all of the relevant expense information in the Parks and Recreation Fund and our Lighting Landscape Funds. The materials from our previous meeting, which were held on July 17th, when we discussed at length the general fund and the deficit there, what gives rise to the deficit, and potential options for reducing that deficit, that PowerPoint presentation is available on the city's website. And so we would encourage any members of the public who have not seen that to review it because it is part and parcel of the series of meetings that we will hold on this issue. So the first thing I want to do is spend just a couple minutes reviewing some slides that were in that previous presentation. And this is a fiscal sustainability project because the city is presently spending at an unsustainable rate. We are spending beyond our means, and the general fund has been operating with a structural deficit for a number of years. Between FY19 and 20, if we do nothing, the amount of the deficit will mean that we will have spent $4.1 million more than we had coming in that 2-year period. And so I believe that it is time that the council, the staff, and the community commit themselves to operating within our means. What you see next is a general fund summary slide, and I'm going to only really be talking about the Parks and Rec and Lighting Landscaping funds tonight, but this does encapsulate the broad discussion we had 2 weeks ago. And that is that this is the summary of our general fund, and it shows the extent to why I have asserted to you that the city has a financial crisis on its hands. Wrong button. If we look here at the end, on June 30th, 2018, the city of Galt had $10,500,000 in audited fund balance in its general fund. And there were some things that we had to take care of in the beginning of the next fiscal year. Some deferred loans, some prepaid in inventory costs, a subsidy to the Northeast Area Lighting and Landscape District, a payment to cover the debt in the Parks and Recreation Fund. And then this last one is a reserve, and that is listed as an expense because really what we did there is the city parked $4.4 million off to the side for a rainy day reserve or an emergency reserve. And so that reduced this $10.5 million, all these things reduced that to an available fund balance of $4.8 million. Then, over the course of last fiscal year, we had income come in, that's reflected in revenues. We had some transfers in, reflected as revenues. We had expenses generally in the general fund of nearly $15 million, $14,800,000. We had some capital that cost about $400,000. Some transfers that went out and transfer, it encapsulates a number of various items, and that's why it's titled that way. We were able to avoid, for that year because of some one-time money, a deficit in the Northeast Area Lighting Landscape District, but we see that the west side was still in deficit. And then last fiscal year, which incidentally just ended a few days ago on June 30th, the budget called for an over expenditure in Parks and Recreation of $1.4 million. When there's an over expenditure in Parks and Recreation, as we'll talk about tonight, it's because the expenditures far exceeded available revenue. Something has to pay for all those expenditures, and that's the general fund. And so what happened is at the end of, on June 30th, 2019, just a month ago, we were budgeted to have just $2.4 million left of the available $4.8 million available fund balance, which meant we would have overexpended by about $2.4 million. And so we carry this up to this year, July 1, just 30 days ago. We started this year with the budgeted available fund balance of $2.4 million. And if we go through all of these expenditures this year between now, or July 1 of this year, and June 30 of 2020, we'll end with an available fund balance of $777,000. And that includes $1.2 million of covering the deficit in the Parks and Recreation Fund. So over the course of a 2-year period, without action on the part of the City Council and staff, we will have started last year with $4.8 million in available fund balance, and we will have dropped it to $777,000. And that means that we would then be in the next fiscal year looking at using our emergency reserves. So without action, in the span of 3.5 years, this city will spend through both that available fund balance and its emergency reserves, which is why we need to take action. So, how will fiscal sustainability occur? How will this plan unfold? Our immediate focus is going to be on short-term actions we can take this fiscal year and setting ourselves up for establishing a new 2-year budget beginning probably late this fall and early next winter. And those are going to be actions we can take immediately to reduce expenditures. We'll also be focusing on, and the city will need to focus on, midterm decisions that it can make over the course of the next 2 to 3 years to continue to evaluate expenditure reduction, service levels, and employee costs, all as a means of controlling our expenditures. And then finally, we need to focus on long-term measures. And I said this to you 2 weeks ago, I'll repeat it tonight, that without additional long-term funding that we can rely on across a broad spectrum of areas in both the general fund, in Parks and Recreation, and in our lighting and landscaping districts, without doing that, the city will just suffer from a death of 1,000 cuts. You'll just have to continue to cut, because revenues simply won't keep up without establishing new means of obtaining them. The purpose of this meeting is it's the second of 4 meetings, and as I've indicated, we'll talk about Parks and Rec and lighting landscaping. We've already, on June 17th, been over the general fund. So what you see there is what we'll talk about tonight. We're going to be going through a review of what it would mean. What do 10 and 20% cuts look like? Just what do they look like? And then on August 27th, this date is a bit of a change. We modified our schedule from the previous presentation to August 27th because there were certain things that the council asked at our last meeting that we are working to prepare, but we're going to need additional time. We don't want to give short shrift to what is a very important conversation of staff, of the council, and on behalf of the community. And so our next meeting on this topic would take place on August 27. And that's where you would consider, what I identify as recommended expenditure reductions. And then on September 3rd, the council would consider those expenditure reductions in an action item at your regularly scheduled council meeting. Time is of the essence. We need to act now, because if we wait too long into this fiscal year, we hard code in those expenses and we lose the ability to achieve savings. And so, as I did last time, I'd like to suggest ground rules for this presentation. Number one, this is an information session. This isn't an action session. It's an information session. It's a time to become informed. It's a time to ask questions. It's a time to dive deeper into the expenditures that make up Parks and Recreation and our lighting landscaping districts. This isn't a meeting to stake out a position. Don't cut that, cut that. Don't do this, but do this. This is a time, again, to take in information. The time to stake out positions will come in due course. And again, ask questions. The only way to truly understand the budget and the situation we're in is to ask questions. We had a bit of a discussion, and this is, again, from the previous slideshow, but core versus non-core services. Core services, as we identified before, are those services that are typically mandated by law. We can think of police or certain of our public works services, finance, the tracking of public monies, whether it's property tax or sales tax, any revenue that comes in, any expenditure that goes out. We are obligated by law to track in a particular way, to follow generally accepted accounting principles and follow the proclamations and the guidance and the rules of the Government Accounting Standards Board. And so those are all mandated. Community development has mandated services, as well as things like the city clerk or certain of our administrative functions. All things that are prescribed by us, by the state of California or the federal government, and that we don't have a choice but to follow. Other services we provide are non-core, but they may not be required, but they are services that nonetheless may help define the character of our community. They define life in Galt, California, and they are nonetheless important to us. And so we would point out certain of those may be libraries or parks, recreation programming, certain of our boards and commissions, other non-core services, even in the police department, but that nonetheless we undertake or have in the past undertaken because we believe that they help Galt to be a better place. but it's an important distinction that cities can truly define core and non-core services for themselves and come up with that list of things. But the key is that we have to be able to pay for those services. And so what are we about to review? We're going to, as I've said, review the Parks and Recreation revenue sources, its expenditures, the potential for expenditures or an overview of those expenditures and associated services as it relates to program reduction. The lighting landscape districts, as well as what it means to have any potential reductions. The revenues of the Parks and Recreation Parks and Recreation Fund come to us primarily, or in large measure, from the Galt market, and we separately track those. They come to us from our aquatic center and from other fees and park rental. Our park maintenance the revenues are used to support park maintenance and our recreation programming generally. And a lot of that is landscape maintenance costs. The current revenues, as I've highlighted, are insufficient to cover those costs. And in this fiscal year alone, the budget, if we're to do everything that is budgeted in the expenditure category, we will exceed revenues in the Parks and Rec budget by $1.2 million. And the general fund will then be required to cover that, and that is what then leads to the deficit in the general fund. And again, our long-range plan has us running out of general fund, available fund balance, and reserves by 2024. So this is a summary of the Parks and Recreation Fund. And it walks us through from June 30th of last year, where we had a little over $1 million deficit that the Parks and Rec Fund ran in FY18. And that was cleared, that was covered by the general fund at that time, or last year. You see this million, the $1,073,000. That is covering this negative fund balance, as well as an additional negative fund balance related to certain of our prepaids and inventory costs. And so the way this fund is set up is that if it goes negative, you're going to see a line item for the general fund to kick in revenue. And it used to be that we would pay the, or clear the debt of the Parks and Rec Fund in the next fiscal year. And that's why you see that $1,073,000 showing up. And it creates the illusion of a $100 fund balance. But then the revenues that come in, I keep hitting the wrong button, I'm sorry folks. The revenues that come in is $3.2 million. There's some transfers in. You see the general fund contribution that I referred to in the previous general fund slide at $1.4 million, and then we have our expenditures, $3.4 million, $300,000 on operations and maintenance and personnel, $309,000 on capital, transfers out the cost of our cost allocation plan. And I can discuss that more further, but that is referring to all of the services that are provided to the Parks and Rec Fund from other funds of the city. And then deferred maintenance and equipment at about $101,000. All of that contributes to the need for the general fund to provide this $1.4 million, because all these expenditures are much larger than the ultimate available revenues. And so we just carry that up in FY20, which is our current fiscal year. We'll go through these same types of expenditures. Parks and Rec worked at reducing the draw on the general fund. That comes down from $1.4 to $1.2 million. And again, this budget was adopted back in 2018, back in, I think, May or June of 2018. And, but again, these expenses all contribute to the need for the general fund to provide the $1.2 million. But that is your Parks and Rec Fund summary. This is our long-range financial plan. We talked about running out of money by 2024. The green line here is Parks and Rec Fund, and this is a projection between FY18 and FY24 of how far down in debt it will sink, which is going to be very, very significant, below about an 8 million mark, unless we figure out how to reduce expenditures. This line is the lighting landscape districts. Certainly, they aren't, the loss in those districts isn't dramatic, but the point is, and I'll make this later, there just isn't enough revenue coming in to cover the present-day costs of lighting landscape. The blue line is our general fund, and as I indicated to you, that left to its own devices, left alone, not to have to cover debt anywhere in another fund, the general fund is okay on its own, or it's staying above water. But when we combine this line, Parks and Rec, this line, lighting landscape, with the general fund, we come up with our long-term projection, and those other funds will drag the general fund down to a point where it will have spent through all available funding. What does that mean? What does that mean? What's the practical effect of having spent through your available fund balance and your emergency reserves? It means that your cash flow and ability to keep up with the ongoing operations and maintenance payments is likely compromised to an extreme degree, where it could be possible you wouldn't be able to make payroll. Certainly in another year you wouldn't be, because you'd likely have a negative cash balance, and the city very well could be facing financial insolvency. And so that's what we want to prevent. So here's another look at the Parks and Rec Fund summary by segment. We break it out. You see Parks and Rec right here, and you see all the revenues, charges for services and the like, contribution from the market at $1.2 million, cleared over expenditures, contribution from the general fund, and you see in a rolled up format all the expenses. But over here, let's just focus in real quickly on the market itself. The Galt Flea Market brings in, or in FY20, will bring in $2,585,000. And it will incur about $1.1 million of expense. And its share of the cost allocation plan services other funds provide to the Parks and Rec Fund is about $238,000. But you can see that we track the revenue, we track our contributions to from the market over to Parks and Rec generally, and we also track the market as individual expense categories. And so we wanted just to break this out so that you could see that the market is providing about as much money as the general fund is covering in debt or deficit in the Parks and Rec Fund. But let's take a look at Galt market revenues since 2005. And this tells a much more grim story. Back in 2005, we had nearly $3.6 million, something more than $3.5 million in gross income, against which expenses were applied, and the amount of money contributed then to Parks and Recreation was probably on the order of $2.4, $2.5 million, maybe a little bit more than that. But we see that since 2005, a downward trend, leveling out at times, but nonetheless, a continued downward trend of more than $1 million. We bring in $1 million less today, this fiscal year, than we did in 2005. And that is important piece of information to store. So let's talk a little bit about the services that the Parks and Recreation Department provides, and it supports those programs that benefit our parks. Some of our parks are passive parks. They're used by neighborhoods. There aren't necessarily organized activities at those parks. Other of our parks are indeed active parks. The Sports Complex, Walker Park, Harvey Park, Meadowview Park, places that may host sporting events and organized events. And these programs and services are provided significantly because of funding supplied by the general fund in covering the debt and the cost of all of those recreation facilities and programming that we provide on the part of our community. The city of Galt spends about $113 per citizen on Parks and Recreation program. This is the second highest in Sacramento County. The city of Folsom is the highest at about $157 per capita. And so when we combine decreasing revenues and increasing operating costs at our market, as well as in some of our recreation programs brought about by things like minimum wage increases, insurance cost increases, things like that, it contributes to the deficit that the Parks and Recreation Fund itself operates. And historically, Parks and Recreation operates under its own fund because the market revenues are required by law to be used in support of the Parks and Recreation programming and facilities and the costs that they incur. One of the things that I want to highlight, though, is this last bullet, is that as we begin to get into the nitty-gritty of costs, one of the things that the costs that you will see here do not include is administration or central services. So we're about to launch in a minute to some of our programming costs. And when we get to individual programs, when you see T-ball up there, or you see another type of program, it isn't including administration or central service costs. This is a slide of the areas that we have lighting landscape districts or community facilities districts. And so we receive some measure of funding from the property owners that reside in those districts. They're colored differently depending on which district they are. The big gold district you see up there is the Northeast Area Lighting Landscape District. And then these are all of, I'll go back again just to demonstrate. We overlay that, all those districts in areas where you see no color other than white. We overlay those with all of the various facilities that receive some measure of service from Parks and Recreation or lighting landscape districts. And so we have quite a few. But we'll get back to that map in a little bit. That was the legend, but you can't read it. So. The Parks and Recreation Fund 06, like all of the other departments in the city, were asked to come up with 10 and 20% cuts. And so here we display for you 10 and 20% cut values. 10%, $265,000, 20%, $530,000. And that's of the existing budget. But if we were to solve our entire Parks and Rec budgetary problem of $1.2 million just inside the Parks and Recreation Department, or that fund, it would require cuts of 46%. So that's one of the reasons why I asked everybody all the departments of the city to help present solutions. And this does exclude market expenditures and central services. These values exclude market expenditures and our cost allocation plan. So in 2010, this is what your Parks and Recreation Department looked like. This was the staff. At the top, the director, there's an administrative assistant, we have a park superintendent, special projects manager, recreation supervisor, and 2 recreation supervisors overseeing different things. One was sports and special interest program. The other recreation supervisor oversaw aquatics and some other programming. And you can see the staff below. Over the course of the next few years, as the city grappled with budgetary problems of the time, you see some positions eliminated. Park superintendent, the recreation supervisor, assistant market operations supervisor, all eliminated from the organizational chart in Parks and Recreation. And an additional position was frozen or has been frozen, and that's a full-time recreation coordinator position. And so if we look at the, what that looked like after those were eliminated, this gives you a viewpoint of the current Parks and Recreation organizational chart. You see the grayed out boxes are those positions that were eliminated over time, and this recreation coordinator position has been backfilled with some part-time help, just as a measure of trying to ensure that the programming happens as best it can. And so then if we look at the administration portion of the Parks and Rec Department, we see the financial summary, and we see that there's personnel costs, operation and maintenance costs, and the total total cost for administration in Parks and Rec is about just shy of $500,000. But what does Parks and Recreation Administration do? Well, we can see there that first of all, they're responsible for the overall operation of Parks and Recreation, which includes not only the Parks and Rec facilities and programming, but also overseeing lighting and landscaping districts. It's where the community goes to sign up for programming, they're the contact for or outside organizations, sporting groups and districts. They again oversee the landscaping. They take care of the activity registration software that we use, and of course the multitude of record keeping, including $2.5 million that initially comes into the Galt market. And so what would cuts amount to just from administration alone? It would amount to $48,900, $49,000. And so without laying anybody off, quite candidly, what they've been able to reduce out of an already reduced budget over the years, remember, you saw positions eliminated in the previous slides, and correspondingly, maintenance and operation had apparently been eliminated over the course of those years as well. The total, eliminating some staffing at the front desk being the single largest item, the total estimated savings through these cuts is $23,000. It's short of this 10% goal. But what does that mean? Of what you saw on this list, what would the impacts be to the community of these cuts? Well, there would be no training and travel for the director and staff to the CPRS conference. CPRS, California Parks and Recreation Society, it is a group of cities and counties and special districts, all that meet talk about recreational programming and industry best practices. It's where a lot of information and creativity is shared, and how to do things with less, how to come up with programming for less. But that would have to be eliminated because in the maintenance and operations budgets, there really isn't a lot of additional funding to eliminate. It would mean that we probably have to eliminate some of the advertising we have in local publications promoting some of our events, and reduce the part-time loss would mean a reduction in front counter hours. The Parks Division, key considerations. So we're now switching to Parks Maintenance. Think of Parks taking care of the facilities. The key considerations there are that parks serve as that gathering place, whether it's passive recreation, you go out and you have a picnic on an evening or a weekend afternoon. It's where people go to run, enjoy exercise, and stay fit. It's a place that parks generally can be seen if they can be kept up, if the organization has the money to keep them up in proper shape, they can be seen as increasing property values. And the quality of parks are often cited by business and residents as to why they move to a community. So the budget in parks starts off with a revenue item. And everything that we've presented tonight, if it actually has a revenue associated with it, we're identifying that in order to provide the council and the community with a glimpse of what the net costs of these operations are. And so there are some revenues that come in through rentals at our park facilities, and that's about $145,000. But the overall operations and maintenance between personnel and the O&M costs, part of which is our landscaping contract for parks, and then some capital outlay where we have to go out and fix something or affect some other type of repair to a fixed facility, comes to $891,000. And so when you subtract off the revenues to net that out, the net cost of our parks to the community is just shy of $750,000. And again, this does not include additional support costs of 23% for parks admin or a 42% cost of central services. So that's your cost allocation plan. It doesn't include that. So it'd be $89,000 if the Parks Division had to come up with cuts, and they worked hard at coming up with cuts, and part of the cuts was the reduced landscaping contract that was approved in June. And the reason why that preceded this discussion tonight and action was because that was a contract that came up for a bid, and we needed to effect service by July 1. And so we did that, and we knew where we were headed as a budget. We knew what our long-term financial plan was telling us, and so that bid included a whole series of options, from maintaining weekly service as had been maintained in previous years, all the way to bi-weekly, every 3 weeks, every month. And we ultimately recommended and the council approved the monthly option. And the reduced landscape for attributable under that contract to this division is about $41,000. And then we've made some modifications to tree maintenance. We were able to get through, I think, all the tree maintenance, or a substantial, the greatest portion of tree maintenance under previous budgets, and we've been able to, at least for this year, eliminate that amount of the tree maintenance budget because of that. Again, reduced travel and reduced part-time staff still falls somewhat short of being able to come up with the overall desired 10% cuts. So what are the impacts of that? Because every cut we make, whether it's in Parks and Rec or lighting, landscaping, or the general fund, will have an impact on the community. It is those sorts of cuts at the dollars that we're talking, in order to balance our budget, are going to have community-wide impacts. The only impact that would be worse than these would ultimately be financial insolvency on the part of the city. And so the reduction in training, for obvious reasons that I stated, it will impact that. It will impact our ability to have as highly trained a staff as we do now. And I spoke to the CPRS issue, not being paying dues into that and being a part of it will mean that some of the free training in network or training in network that naturally comes along with those costs would be lost to us. We've talked a little bit about the fact that the newly approved landscape contract results in service reductions. We're seeing that around our city and our parks and streetscapes now. We had a public speaker earlier on that very topic. Again, reduced training and travel, reduction in part-time staffing will eliminate. Again, each time we talk about this, in this case, it's just focused again on the Parks Division, but it will result in a reduction in service level at our parks during the week on going out and taking out the garbage, cleaning the restrooms. In fact, we believe that a reduction at this level would mean that the restrooms may need to be closed. And so, as I've talked a little bit about the Parks Division, our total landscape costs as a city are shared between parks, between lighting landscape districts, and between certain areas of our community that do not pay any sort of a fee like the lighting landscape districts do. And I'll talk more about that swath of the city that doesn't pay anything when I get to the specific lighting landscape district discussion. But here's the cost of water and landscaping by site that's covered in the parks budget. And so this is just water and landscaping and at all of these sites. And you can see that it totals about $185,000. In a couple of these places that are asterisked, with one asterisk, it may not include the water cost, but it includes others. But by and large, we spend this amount of money at most of these facilities on water and landscaping.
Excuse me, Tom, is Walker Park on there?
No, that's, oh, go ahead, Marmondo.
It should be under, in an L&L.
Yeah,
Majority of them.
it's covered by the L&L.
These aren't under LNLs, that's important, okay.
Yeah, some, it depends on when these facilities were first developed. So look at Harvey Park. That's a historic park developed long before L&Ls were ever around. And so some of these landscaped areas get covered by certain different portions of our budget depending on when they first originated. And when other developments came in, the city created the L&L districts in an effort to find funding for parks within those L&L districts. And so that's why you see this separation of facilities. So what if we were to brown all the parks out? I mean, literally not water them, not do anything. And that's what that first bullet is talking about. It would mean the elimination of all watering, not just a little bit, just none, and no landscaping. It would really mean that it would be obviously less attractive is an understatement. These parks would become unfunctional in many respects for families and for individuals. It would affect obviously passive enjoyment. Without even thinking about our sporting facilities, doing that would affect even passive enjoyment of recreational spaces. And when you go past those sorts of things, when they're completely browned out, I think the CSD previously is completely browned out certain of the parks. As you drive by those, or in Stockton, they certainly have done it. It just gives you a diminished view, certainly, of property values. And so, again, we highlight that trying to maintain a semblance of attractiveness of our parks and recreation facilities is important to businesses and homeowners. So we also have central streetscapes, and so these are areas that are covered under Fund 6, the Parks and Recreation budget. These are, a number of these are in the immediate area, but about $7,000 in the cost of water and landscape at the 4 areas highlighted there. If those streetscapes were to be browned out similar to the parks, they'd clearly suffer in appearance. There'd be it would mean the elimination of all watering and landscape services. So while you might be able to save that amount, you would certainly lose plant life. And then, of course, it just has a very poor reflection as you drive by, or if you were to live near it or in front of it. Turning now to the Recreation Division, we take in revenues there. And so those we referred to on that Recreation Fund, Parks and Rec Fund summary as fees for service. We take in about $171,000, and we have about $567,000 in total expenses. And so the net cost of our recreation programming, and I'm about to go through a bunch of slides on all that recreation programming, so you'll see what I'm talking about, but our net cost is just shy of $400,000. But again, it does not include the cost of parks admin, 23% cost there, and this does not include a 42% cost of central services. If it did, that would be much larger. So what does it mean to cut 10% of the Recreation Division? It means about $56,000, almost $57,000, and here are the items that I identified to be reduced. We'll get into a little bit more of a discussion as to what that means for some of those. I've already highlighted the fact that our recreation coordinator position is frozen and would remain frozen under this 10%, or under the cut scenario, not quite 10%, but that we would backfill with some part-time. Part-time at least allows us to have a staff addressing the issues. It usually is not as productive or as effective as having a full-time member do that, but the full-time member then incurs much more cost in certain of the legacy costs associated with retirement and health care and the like. But this effort here, based on all the other cuts that have occurred in prior years, amounts to about $49,000 in cost elimination or potential savings. So what would that mean? What would the impacts be? Well, the Positive Coaching Alliance training books, training and books would no longer be provided to the volunteer coaches. Again, this division would not be able to avail itself to the CPRS trainings and events. It would mean elimination of uniforms for the Meals on Wheels program, and the elimination of sweaters for recreation staff. And we wouldn't provide a bounce house for opening day, and then I've highlighted the freezing of the recreation coordinator position. But those would all be impacts that would be a result of those cuts. Okay, so now I'm going to start a series of slides that are going through. These slides are developed to highlight for the council the cost of the programming versus any revenue for the programming that we have. And we're going to go through a lot of programming that happens within our recreation division. First of all, as we look at the sports complex concession operations, one of the things that we confront is that on revenue of $57,000, we have expenses of $84,000. So it's a net loss of $27,000 to operate that concession. And so we have a recommendation for you on that later. The city provides a very valuable Meals on Wheels program in partnership with the Asian Community Center. And the Meals on Wheels program costs a lot more than this, but the city's contribution to Meals on Wheels costs approximately $21,000. But that delivers the Meals on Wheels program in total provides 4,500 meals a week to seniors and 20 to 30 meals a week to 20 to 30 meals a week to seniors. The 4,500, how is that per year, Mondo?
Yes.
Yeah, that's 4,500 a year. Sorry, I originally misspoke. Then we have another program, a very important program for our special teens and adults. It's recreational programming. Not a tremendous cost associated, excuse me, with this, but it does come at a cost of $5,000. But these are utilized by about 30 participants and includes some very rewarding programming for them. We have something called the Galt-based Youth Sports Player Fee, and it's essentially organizations where the 80% of the participants live within the Galt city limits, that have the ability in favor of a $10 per player fee to that fee then gets isolated and sent to an account to $5 of that $10 goes to the Walker Park Artificial Turf Replacement Fund, and the other $5 is used for maintenance of the sports fields during the sports season. But in favor of that $10 fee, which gets used for those purposes, then the teams can have reduced rates for the lights from $35 an hour to $20 an hour. Organizations that weren't part of or didn't qualify for this would pay $35 an hour for lights, whereas those that qualify receive a $15 per hour discount. And then there's no charge for these groups that pay the fee, that qualify to pay the fee for the sporting facilities. When we look at youth t-ball and instructional and softball, what you see there are the costs, excluding any administrative and central service costs for the city to put on the program. And so each of those age ranges has a separate cost for that, and it totals for all of those programs through the various ages about $38,000. And that, again, that's the ultimate cost to the city over and above the revenue. And then for youth basketball, first grade through 8th grade, we see that the total net loss or net cost to the city is just shy of $52,000 a year. Men's and co-ed softball programs, the ultimate cost to the city is $23,400 a year. Miscellaneous recreation. So we have some miscellaneous recreation programs that where there is revenue that's brought in, and then there are special interest instructors who really operate kind of under a bit of a contract, if you will, to provide that programming. That costs us about $50,000, and so the estimated net revenue from doing that is $25,000. This is a program that actually nets income to the city. Where does that $25,000 go? Well, it helps keep the deficit of the Parks and Recreation program $25,000 lower than it otherwise would be. So here's a summary of what I've just run through. The concession stand, Meals on Wheels, STAR, the t-ball, instructional and softball, basketball, adult men's and co-ed softball, and special interest programs. When you add all that up, subtract out the revenue, it's a cost of about $142,000 to the Parks and Recreation Fund. And if we were to add in the utilities, operations, and administration, that would add another $254,000. And so that's where that ties out to, oops, I keep hitting that dang button, the just shy of 400,000 that we talked about originally. But again, just the so-called, if you wanted to phrase it as hard costs of all these, about $142,000. So now let's turn the page to another of our divisions, which is aquatics, and we see that the Aquatic Center does bring in revenue of $185,000. It has in FY20 anticipated expenditures of $476,000. The net cost of aquatics in FY20 would be about $291,000, but again, part of that 291 is because we have some serious maintenance that we have to undertake that will require a capital outlay. Capital outlay doesn't always happen, but having said that, aquatic centers are quite expensive. I've been in a number of California cities. I've never seen an aquatics program that generated revenue over expenditure. It doesn't happen, and they can be quite capital intensive, especially when major repairs come about. And so our average for the last 3 years of cost to operate the aquatics program is about $103,000 of expense over available income, meaning that our aquatics program runs a deficit of about $103,000 on average for the last 3 years. That does not include administration or central service costs. We have some other parks and recreation programs we wanted to highlight. The after-school program, we see there that there's about $40,000 in income there, about $48,000 in cost. So the net cost of ACES is that $8,600. We look at the SOAR program, and that is about $207,000 in income on $138,000 of expenditure. So that has a net revenue of $68,000. And then preschool, again, about $40,000 in revenue on $41,000 of expenses, a bit of a deficit there of $1,100. Staff actually thinks that they can come up with a solution for that $1,100 to make it net out. But again, no administrative or central service costs. So now we'll go to the lighting landscape districts and talk a little bit about those and where we land on those, and we can get into just a little bit more detail as to how they were created, why they were created, and I can share a little bit of information about the assessments that make up the revenue. So there's the summary of our lighting landscape districts, 32, 33, and 37. We see the northeast area is running a deficit in FY20 of about $69,000, the west side of $14,000. For right now, L&L number 3 has a positive balance, but it is headed towards insolvency itself. And so that's why it's here. So if we assess for these, if we assess for the northeast area lighting landscape district and we assess for the west side lighting landscape district and the property owners pay in, why is it that we have a deficit? Shouldn't the assessment cover the cost of the landscaping? Well, with both those districts, they were created in the 1990s, the early 1990s. And they were created at a time when there was, even in the early 90s, there was quite a bit of change in California as to how municipalities were financed and how they could finance things like landscape costs and the like. And everybody has probably heard of Proposition 13. It had been passed 12 years earlier than 1990, in about 1978. And it set a limit on the upward growth of property taxes. And prior to Proposition 13, there was a lot more flexibility on the part of communities to assess the cost of parks or landscaping and all manner of types of general fund costs. But the proposition was passed, and it limited that. And so new mechanisms had to be found. And as those new mechanisms were found, they came, of course, sometimes with their own limitations, or they may have been a good idea that hadn't fully flowered. And so when Northeast and West Side were created, they were created without cost of living indexes. Think of CPI. And so the amount of money that is being collected from as an assessment from the property owners in the Northeast area are set at $1990 values. And so what was $1 in the early 1990s is now about 45 cents today. But the cost of providing landscape service far exceeds that cost. Far exceeds 45 cents, for sure, on the assessed valuation. And so we have this disparity that has grown over time, and for a while, the city has covered that with general fund revenues, just like it covers the $1.2 million this year in Parks and Rec and the $1.4 million last year. It has been covering any deficits in the lighting landscaping districts, which is good for the level of service, for sure, right? But it provides the illusion that the assessment is enough. And so when we look at just the revenue that comes in and we look at the expense that goes out, we see that Northeast and West Side are continue to slip deeper and deeper into insolvency. And as I indicated, that number 3 will continue its way towards insolvency as well. So, what's one of the other complications that we have with landscaping costs? One of the other problems, I want to go forward here a slide, and I'll come back to those two. See those districts where there's color? There's an assessment. Now, where there's color in a number of those, there is an assessment that is completely insufficient to meet current day costs. But you see all this area where there is no color? All this down through here? Mm-hmm. There are no assessments there. And there are no assessments there because that's the central city. That's Galt that was created prior to Proposition 13, largely prior, construction and residential that occurred prior to the establishment of lighting and landscape districts, or CFDs, that helped to fund the cost of landscaping. And so as we try to put money together to cover the cost of landscaping all our parks, of landscaping along the various corridors, think of the C Street interchange and other areas, we come up short in revenue because none of these are covered by a lighting landscape district. And the city's ability to obtain revenue, such as it did back prior to Prop 13, has been cut off. So that contributes to part of the funding problem.
The new homes that are being built, the ones over the LA homes over there, the $500,000 homes, they're not contributing to this? What, I'm just curious, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, I have so many questions, but I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, you have to wait till the presentation's over. if anybody wants to make public comment, fill out the form. You can still
Yeah.
hand it over to the chief, and we'll be glad.
And we'll be able to get to things like that. So, or answer questions like that. So, again, Northeast Lighting, I went over a bit of this, established in 1990 by resolution, no annual escalator. There is an escalator in 3, but it's given the costs, even the escalator is insufficient over time to keep that at present levels, to keep that fund from slipping into deficit. So again, most of the city's not covered. I covered a lot of this in my, when I was we were looking at the map. General fund covers those deficits, but again, that's part of what contributes to the general fund's overall deficit condition. And so we were just there. That again is the overlay of all these areas. So, you know, where you see parks and things like that, those areas are not covered by assessments from the portions of the city that I was talking about here that don't have any sort of an assessment district. So what do cuts mean? Northeast, a 10% cut, 56,500, a 20% cut, 113. On the west side, 16 and 32,000 respectively. And in number 3, 8,600 and 17,000 respectively. That's what cuts would amount to if we were to do 10 and 20% cuts there. So the Northeast Area Lighting Landscape District is in the cost of water and landscaping in these areas covered by that district is about $50,000, includes these parks. And streetscapes in that area costs about $81,000 and includes all of these areas. And open space areas include these at a cost of about almost $18,000. That's water and landscape. And so we've been able to reduce the deficit in the Northeast area by about $65,000 by a reduction in the landscape maintenance contract. You're seeing the effect of that today. And in having done tree maintenance and being able to eliminate for this year about $18,000 worth of tree maintenance. But we spend more than $566,000 every year on the Northeast Area Lighting Landscape District. In the west side, cost of water at these locations, it's about $19,000. The streetscapes, all of these streetscapes along these roads, about $19,000. Cuts or cost eliminate. So we spend $163,000 annually on the west side, and the cost elimination so far this year because of the landscape contract and again the savings with tree maintenance is about $18,000. So we're coming close to, or in this case, being able to move a little bit past the deficit that we have in this fiscal year alone through these cost elimination measures. Lighting Landscape District number 3, Parks, Walker Park. Mayor, that hopefully answers your question. The cost of water and landscaping at Walker Park, which is only partially constructed. Hopefully the public knows that there is a much larger master plan for that facility, but one of our concerns is that if you build it, they will come, and if you build it, there will be maintenance costs, and so we have to be able to plan for those. Streetscapes along these roads cost Lincoln Way, Wilder Way, about $10,500. And so then the reductions that we've made there amount to about $17,600, $17,700. And we spend about $87,000 annually on LLD number 3. And so what would total brownout conditions mean? Well, brownout and reduced lighting impact, because remember, lighting and landscaping, so the first word is lighting, and that helps pay for street lights as well. And so it would be possible, I suppose, to brown out some of, or turn off some of the street lights. But there would be impact to not only at night, obviously, if we did that, but there's impact that you're seeing to the streetscapes today. And we've talked about that. Our biggest concerns are the health of the plant life, the unkempt look of the area between trimmings. Once it gets trimmed once a month, for a week or two, it's going to look okay, but it's, you know, it's then going to look shaggy only to be retreated. So where are we now? We're presently spending far beyond our means. We actually are getting close to the end of this presentation, but the fact of the matter is that we're spending beyond our means in an unsustainable way. We simply don't have enough revenue coming in to meet these costs. And so we talked about the market earlier, and we talked about the market this year budgeted to bring in 2.5, almost $2.6 million. That is more money than we bring in sales tax each year. I'm not sure if the public realizes, but every time you pay sales tax and you go out to dinner, you pay sales tax on the bill, or you buy a item at the hardware store and pay sales tax on it, the city's getting less than a penny of every dollar of sales tax. Most of that sales tax goes to the state of California. It then gets redistributed to the state agencies and to counties, but we're taking in less than a penny of that, approximately, of that sales tax dollar. Property tax, we get more than that on property tax, but still, it's a fraction, a very small fraction of what the state and counties get. Counties are a political subdivision of the state, so they rely on all their funding from the state of California. And here in cities, it's not the same. Galt market revenues, although at one time were sufficient to cover the cost of parks and recreation, they no longer are. And that's why we have been depleting the general fund to keep up with where we've been at. And again, you've heard me talk about this year's deficit in Parks and Rec is $1.2 million. And so the next steps that we will take is that on August 27th, I'll be returning to this council with options. And you will conduct a review of those potential expense reductions. We'll talk about them, how I came up with them, why I'm recommending them. We'll talk a little bit. Those recommendations that I come to you with on August 27th will be based on short-term recommendations, actions we can take without delay to reduce our expenditures and build a balanced budget for the remainder of this fiscal year. I will also talk that evening a little bit about some midterm options and recommendations, but midterm means something longer than immediate, an immediate cut. It means that we may have to, it would be something that might take 6 or 12 months to implement for various reasons, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And then I'll talk to you about some long-term options, primarily in the furtherance of establishing additional revenue sources, but nonetheless, we'll talk about those and at least identify some potential options that the city will have to work on over the course of the next year or year and a half in order to bring about. But all of those revenue options, in some way, shape, or form, involve the public by way of some type of a vote. And then on those recommendations, we'll talk about them on August 27th, and they'll be before you for consideration on September 3rd. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions of the council.
Okay, since we have had, some of the public's been waiting an hour and a half to speak, I really want to say how much I appreciate the huge turnout we have tonight. It's very impressive that you guys have heard we're having trouble and you want to come and find out the truth for yourself and what's going on. We're going to let the public speak. We're not going to respond to your questions until after the council then has their questions, because I'm sure a lot of the questions will be the same. Does that make sense to everyone? And some of it may already have been covered, and you may not want to speak, but that's all right. So we're going to start with Denny Rowells, and then Denise McCune is on deck. Patrick O'Flaherty will be third, and then it looks like either P. Combs or Plums. P. Combs, you'll be fourth, okay?
Hello, City Council. My name's Denny Rolls, Chief. Nice that you're here. You know, I heard about his cost cutting and stuff, but he didn't say anything about the benefits. The Aquatic Center teaches kids how to swim. It teaches them not how to drown. Okay, so you cut the Aquatic Center and you take hundreds of kids and you don't teach them how to swim and they drown. That's on somebody by cutting that program. Okay, pure and simple. I understand that the budget, there's problems and stuff. I get that. He talked about core cost. He talked about non-core cost. What he failed to mention is the non-core cost will incur core cost. If you don't have programs for these kids, the chief's going to have a lot more tougher time, because these kids, if they don't have these programs that you're going to cut, he's going to have a lot more calls to be going on. So you're going to increase your core costs by decreasing your non-core costs. He didn't say anything about that. Didn't even bother to mention that. I don't know if that's something that he's going to bring up later on. I understand that this has been a problem for a while. Can was kicked down the road. I'm not here to find fault with anybody. But a business is run with a business plan. And it seems to me that didn't happen. There's ways to generate revenue. Auto malls, it's way too late to put one of those in, generates huge amounts of revenue. Hotels generate revenues. It appears to me that there hasn't been a business plan in place to fix these problems. So now we're talking about browning out parks, taking away activities from our kids. It's totally unacceptable. And I understand that you're going to have to make some cuts somewhere, and I get that. But again, like I said, you eliminate the non-core costs, and you're going to up your core costs. You eliminate that pool, and a kid drowns because he didn't get swimming lessons. A lot of people on the west side rely on that pool. Okay, I mean, pure and simple. I mean, it's hot, it's 100 degrees, it's California. It's a way for them to go out. It's a way for them to get activity. Kids, we talk about kids not wanting to play Nintendos and Xboxes and sitting there at home all day. We take away those programs, that's where those kids will be. We talk about kids and their health and eating and diets and everything else. We take away baseball, we take away basketball, we cut those parks programs. What do you think's going to happen? You take away their activities and you take away these programs, and all you're doing is doing a disservice not only to the community, but to the kids of this community. My kids are no longer doing much with Parks and Rec. I'm speaking on behalf of the parents that still have kids here. That's what brings people here to Galt. I came to Galt in '93 because the parks were great. That aquatic center was awesome. When they built that, and Tony Gora put that in, and the city council put that in, it was great. What I have a problem is, like I said, the city has to be run with a business plan. It was pretty obvious that the flea market isn't going to sustain. As Amazon comes online, you can get it shipped to your home cheaper and stuff like that. I just don't see the city putting in programs, businesses, bringing in revenue. There's ways to generate revenue, and I don't see that. And all I hear is cuts, cuts, cuts. I get it. You're going to have to make some cuts. But at the same time, I sure hope you have a business plan put together to start generating some revenue to bring these programs back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rowells. Denise McCune?
Hi, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'll try to go as fast as I can. I've lived in Galt almost 20 years, and I'm heartbroken at what I see. I'm walking through a community that I loved, and it looks terrible. And what kills me is that I don't see a plan. We have a brand-new development going, Elliott. They're putting landscaping in on a Marengo that we're not going to be able to maintain. What a waste of money.
So I don't understand. We have a plan that was developed in 2015. That's not very long ago. We're 2019. This was developed in 2015 that requires them to put all these trees, all these shrubs, all these vines, all of these things to make the landscape look great. And yet we haven't even looked at the fact that maybe we could do drip irrigation, do more rock landscaping, do a lot less greenway, do a lot more design, and get rid of the required maintenance. Put in succulents, things like that that don't require the upkeep that we obviously can't afford. And so the other thing is the Galt market. We've seen this huge decline. I mean, it's evident from 2005, and yet why haven't we done something to look at other ways to get funding for our park and recs? It seems to me right now, in order to deal with the park and rec deficit, which is really where it's at, we're going to go after the very thing that's going to draw businesses to our community. Our community looks terrible. Our parks look terrible. Our greenways look terrible. And, you know, as a business owner, my family has 2 businesses in Elk Grove. I wouldn't want to put a business here right now, because I'd be going, what's going to happen next? What are they going to cut next? What else is going to happen in this community? And it saddens me to see that. It saddens me to see that the thing that's going to draw families to our community and additional housing and businesses to our community is the thing that we're not looking at. And I understand we have a huge deficit, and I know that we have to figure it out, but we have to look at other ways to fund it. And, you know, maybe that's grants and things like that for our aquatic, areas and the things that the kids, the Meals on Wheels. I don't know how many grants you've written for those type of programs. We've got hundreds of programs out there. United Way has hundreds of programs where we could be getting grants to help subsidize some of the income that we're throwing out to these programs, because I don't want to see those go. They're great. But I feel like right now we don't have a really good solid plan. I feel like our city is failing us right now as a community member. I don't like what I see in my community. It's sad. And, you know, I want to see businesses come here, but you drive through the community and they're not going to want to come here because they're going to go, what the heck's going on here? And it's just sad. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCune. Is it Patrick O'Flaherty? Okay. All right, P. Combs.
Hi, folks. I'm absolutely new to this. I am Pam Combs. I live in the Carillion area off Vauxhall. And my concern, again, is that Carillion Parkway. That thing is atrocious. Poo, when those boys go lawn mow that and stuff, they're going to have shields on because there's enough poo in there, they're going to be splattered. And there is bottles that were broken, blackberry bushes that hang out from the landscaping that hooked me. The mulberry trees, which are beautiful trees, they drop pods. Usually in September, they're doing it now. And I know from experience that you can fall on this because I take my dog every day for a walk. And if you go, we went 2 years ago in the evening and I fell. I mean, I skidded right on one of those pods and that was the end of that. It's really important for us to really focus upon what our area looks like. That area that you have out there is the growing area, if we ever get anybody to come back through. Because if they drive down Carillion right now, they're going to look at it and go, oh, what's happening in here? Because we look at it and think, what in God's name's going on here? I know that we pay L&L's lighting and landscaping for the area. I posted this morning, and I almost think I started a whole storm. But we pay $148 and change, and you got 3,237 houses out there paying anything between $30 and $300. And I was told today that our budget for next year, which our city manager, what's his name? He's a great guy, by the way. But he didn't have next year's, the 2019, 2020 numbers up there, and that's $469,291. So it was empty. There was nothing up there. And our lighting, we can put in LEDs. I heard that we had LEDs put in on Lake Canyon. But that was it. They got a grant and they were able to do that. But, I mean, can we look up on Amazon or something and see if we got some lighting we can order from China to replace these things if they're that costly? Sorry. But, I mean, really, this, it's kind of common sense. And let's see here. Oh, and they were talking about the baseball fields. Do we have, I don't know if you can answer this, but question, do we have volunteers that run, say, the snack bar at the deal, on the field there? Do we have more volunteers that are part of the team's family? And if we don't, can we get that so we can try to cut costs on, for the kids and their games? Landscape. How much, okay, we're going to once a month. That's not gonna work, because if you look at it right now, all the weeds, everything's taking over, the ivy, the blackberries, and the weeds are taking over. There's the tumbleweeds. Somebody posted a picture today that I think somebody went out there and flung them, but they posted a picture of the tumbleweeds. Now, I mean, how welcoming is a tumbleweed? We could put in.
Ma'am, you have 30, you have 30 more seconds.
Woo! Well, River Rock seeded in cement for the center divides. I mean, you don't have to water it. And you're losing your money on a whole bunch of streetscapes because they have never been touched. That's it. Thank you. Love you.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Glad to see you again. I was. All right, we have Chris Brossman.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a rookie at this as well. I'm just kind of upset with what I'm seeing going on in Galt. Realistically, to me, I look at a lot of what we're doing, and I'm puzzled, and I'm scratching my head and trading texts with Sean and kind of going, hey, what's up, boom, boom, boom. But I just wanted you guys all to hear to me that we're dropping the ball right and left. I mean, to me, it's a revenue issue. So why don't we have more revenue coming through the door? What are we doing to get the flea market going in the other direction? Are all the flea markets shrinking nationwide? I don't think so. I just don't, buy into it. I don't know that we're holding anyone accountable to increase in that market. I mean, I come from the business side of the world, as most of us do. And I'll tell you what, if I had a guy in charge that his numbers were going negative, I'd be looking at another guy. On this report coming up too, you looked at revenues coming into the city. First year or this year that just wrapped up, we had more money coming into the city than we were scheduled to have coming in next year. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my property taxes are going up. But we're showing on that report that we're making less money as a city. That doesn't add up. We just had a bunch of wage increases at the beginning of July. We're going broke, guys. You don't go out and pay more people, pay more money. One of the things I didn't hear come up at all in this conversation was, hey, we need to look at wage cuts. Said, we're paying all these people more money right now as of July 1st, I believe, if all my little sources are correct. But we kicked in a wage increase. Meanwhile, we're talking we're going to lose $4 million. I don't know about your business, but I don't give wage increases when I'm losing $4 million. When I'm making $4 million, we talk wage increases. The concession stand killed me. How in the hell do you run a business, which a concession stand is a business, that's losing money? I'll tell you what, if I was in charge of Parks and Rec, I'd go and find someone to run that building. Hell, you could give it to them for free and the city would lose less money. And I'll guarantee you the person taking over that concession stand's gonna make money. You know, it just kills me again. Again, we're not holding our people frickin' accountable. Excuse that French. And then in the LLCs, so I happen to be in one of those areas that's not highlighted. I'll tell you what, my property taxes pay for that money. I didn't appreciate him insinuating that we're not holding our own. Well, I'm sorry that he doesn't like Proposition 13. As a guy that owns a fair amount of property, I love Proposition 13. That as a senior citizen and as people get older, they love Proposition 13 because guess what? We're not going to have any seniors living in a house if we didn't have Proposition 13 because they can't afford the property taxes. Heard a man mention, you know, for $500,000 houses. We didn't buy $500,000 houses, you know, but if they're valued at $500,000, which a lot of them are now, I don't know that I'd want to afford the property taxes on them, to be frank with you. One of the other things that, and I'm going to wrap it up on this, was we got a lot of people that want to participate in making this city look better, donating their time. We're limiting them to picking up trash because liability, right? Now, in my business, I put customers in race cars that go out and do 200 miles an hour. And my lawyer can come up with a nice document that gets me held harmless from that. Why can't our lawyer hold us harmless so that we can get people out with a weed whacker, a lawnmower, and go and cut the damn grass if they want to cut the grass? I'm tempted to do it myself because reality, what are you going to do? I mean, Chief Police over here probably come arrest me, but what the heck? I think I might get out. Okay, thank you guys very much for your time. I'm venting a little frustration, and I will be at your next meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Brossman. Julie Clark.
Good evening, Council, Madam Mayor. I want to first suggest that if you'd like to save some money, you might want to turn down the air conditioning in here because in the middle of the summertime, I don't feel like I should have to bring a sweater in the City Hall. But so I just made some notes as we were going over the documents tonight, and thank you for being so thorough about that, Mr. Haglund. I appreciate that. So, you know, I guess the one issue that I have many, many issues, but in general, the primary thing that continues to kind of bother me is the fact that there's this insinuation that Parks and Rec is being subsidized by the general fund. Oh, well, they're subsidizing the general fund. Well, we're in such a fortunate position because we have that income coming in from the Galt Flea Market, and Folsom might be spending $157 per resident, but that's money that is coming most likely from their general fund since they're not bringing in all that revenue. I could be mistaken, but I don't think anybody else in the state of California has that kind of cash cow like we do, at least based on my own review of numbers. So the other thing that I am very curious about is, and it was not discussed, is that the Galt Flea Market apparently costs $1 million a year to operate. Now, that comes out to approximately $83,000 a month. Now, how can a parking lot that's open for 8 days a week without many, you know, fancy standing structures that don't require a lot of maintenance, that apparently cost $700 and $703 a year to do landscape and water, how in the world is it cost $83,000 a month to run a flea market open 8 days a month? That is ridiculous. Somebody, I mean, instead of cutting all the low-hanging fruit, the things that actually mean something to people, somebody needs to take a serious look at figuring out why that costs so much money. Now, here's another issue. Eliminating the Parks and Rec Commission, I think at the cost of $3,000 a month, which I don't understand because at least half the meetings last year were canceled. So I'm not sure if you use very expensive copy paper for the informational brochures or what it is, but that to me is an essential. Having public input on the plans of the community is something that shouldn't even be on the table. I mean, you can't stifle public input. I'm sorry, that's just unacceptable. Now, the real truth of this is that the Galt's administrative costs, personnel costs have gone up every year significantly. Our revenue has also continued to increase, but it is not sustainable with this blossoming, blooming CalPERS, this and that mess that was, conveniently shuffled under the rug until all the raises were passed, okay? And nothing against any of the officials here, but guess what? State employees have had to have furloughs, have had to have pay cuts, have had to have hiring freezes, and when you're in that position, you don't take from the citizens those basic things that make our life here livable and desirable. You take it in the places where, I'm sorry, but if you don't live in this city and you're not paying taxes here, I don't owe you anything. You don't have a quote-unquote vested interest unless you live in our sphere of influence. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's citizens first. You take into consideration those people who will be affected because it's part of their job second. At least that's how I see things now. I'm also very troubled by these additional costs, the 24% administrative fee and this 42% central operations cost. Now, I understand that if a sprinkler line breaks or there's something that somebody can't fix in Parks and Rec, that someone from Public Works may need to come out and service that. I get that. But these arbitrary designations of this 24% administrative cost, how many employees do they even have, Parks and Rec? What, 5? How, okay, granted, there are seasonal employees. Most of these things are automated. No way anybody is going to convince me that it costs you $900,000 of Park and Rec Fund money to provide those costs to the Parks and Rec Fund. I would love to see the breakdown of those numbers, and I guess just the accounting is not entirely clear to me, and it seems that there's other areas that need to be evaluated before cutting into these non-core services, which in my mind are very, very crucial to the quality of life here. So anyway, I look forward to seeing how the council weighs in on this and what plans you have to, address these issues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. All right, council discussion. Is that it? Is that it for public comment? Yes. Council questions. Who's
Just
going
in
first?
general, or? Go ahead, you go.
No, I didn't, excuse me, I didn't necessarily have a question, but I know that, people do pay
Is mic on?
fairly high property tax in the community. What I don't think, once that property tax is paid, it's paid to the county. The county then divides that property up, or that money up. In the case of Galt, in new development in the city, we get about 12, maybe 13% of that 1%. So on a $500,000 house, you're paying $5,000 in taxes. About $600 of that actually comes back to the city of Galt. The rest of it is distributed to the county in various special districts. In some parts of the city, it was as high as about 22%, but this goes back years. On the new development where there were annexations, the county basically said either take this or you will not annex the property. So some people are of the misunderstanding that all of that property tax comes back to the city, and that is not the case. So that was more a point of clarification. Thank you.
Rich.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. Thank you to staff, Mr. Solis and your staff for putting a lot of this together, and it was pretty time consuming, and the council has given direction over the last several months since the interim city manager came to take a look at this so we could be solvent moving forward. I do have a couple of questions, and I'd like to at least begin, because I had a citizen ask me about this, and I certainly remember it, and I think this is more of a finance director question, but interim city manager, you can direct it that way if you'd like. We had an audit done on our finances, and the question of the market revenue and expenditures being separated out, maybe not necessarily into two different funds, but it may be in a way that we can look at that separately. Where are we at with that? And I suspect our new audit is coming for this last year. What does that look like now and into the future?
The city has always separately tracked the revenue for the flea market. The flea market itself operates as a division of the Parks and Rec Fund, and so any revenues coming in from the flea market, whether it's a space rental or a return check fee or any type of revenue generated, is identified as market income. And so one of the things that we've talked about doing in pursuit of making that more clear is that as a part of the comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR you often hear it referred to, and after discussion with the city's auditors, is providing just additional clarity and a schedule that highlights all the market revenue. And what you saw on one of the slides tonight is just that. The reason why we know how much revenue comes in the market is because we separately track it. And it's all deposited and credited to market operations on the revenue side, just like we track any expenses that occur on the expenditure side. And I'm not sure if Finance Director wants to add anything, but.
Well said. If you want to look at your slide number 13, that gives you a little glimpse of that separation the city manager just spoke of.
And I also noticed some were taking pictures of the slides. It'll be available online tomorrow.
I did see that when we were going through, and I appreciate that. I think the question really is as we have another independent audit, and I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but as we have another independent audit this year, I would ask that we have the ability to, and maybe even a different slide maybe a different page that actually shows it broken out. And again, I don't suggest that we create another fund and do all that kind of stuff, but certainly have the ability so that it's easier to understand how much we're bringing in city. I think we should always look at expenditures, and I agree with Ms. Clark in that, we need to do what we can to reduce costs of running the market. And I know that we're embarking on an opportunity to explore opportunities for the market grounds and those kinds of things, and I appreciate that effort. But whatever we can do to increase funding, and I'm going to go back to, and I say this probably at every other meeting, but we really, really, really need to, as we look at reducing costs or increasing revenue, really look at community partners, whether it's nonprofit organizations, youth sports or otherwise, social groups, looking at private partnerships with businesses here in our community. I mean, I went out the other day and toured the Cardinal Glass facility. What an amazing facility. And I don't think, I think there's opportunity for partnership there. And then certainly with our other government entities that service our area and or are adjacent to our area, to see if we can't reduce our expenditures in the ways of intergovernment agreements that allow for shared services or whatever. And I want to point out that on page 45, under miscellaneous programs, those are money makers. And what those are contracted services for independent folks to come in, provide a program for our citizens. They actually make money for the city. And again, I don't suggest that we eliminate all of our employees, but there may be a time where, and I'm just going to throw this out, underwater basket weaving is something that people want to do for, a year and a half or 2 years. It's a really good program, and it's very much attended. And then when it's not, we get a different contractor to come in to provide a different service to all age levels, whether it's youth or adults or teens or seniors. So I just want to point that out again. I do agree with some of the speakers tonight that we do need to have that plan moving forward, and I think that's what Mr. Hagelin refers to as the midterm kind of things that we need to do to, again, either increase revenue or decrease service or decrease expenses over time. And maybe that's the opportunity we have to partner with other agencies and other businesses and nonprofits. So those are just some of my thoughts. I want to give an opportunity for my colleagues to speak again, but I'll tell you, it gives me no pleasure. I've been on the council for 6 months, and it gives me no pleasure to have to work with the community and try to determine how we're going to move forward and be solvent. And it really doesn't. It kind of gives me flashbacks of my first term on another board where it was right in the middle of the recession and beginning of the recession. We had to do this, and it's no fun. But I will say this, that if there's any place that we have the ability to reduce costs, then I say, we at least take a look at doing that. I like the idea about lighting landscape, about reducing the amount of green area that we have that you have to mow, water, aerate, and fertilize, and put in some drought-tolerant landscaping. And actually, Mr. Solis and I had that conversation, I think, in December about moving forward, even doing that in some of the park areas that have hardscape, and then on the other side of the hardscape is grassy area and a fence. It's a perfect opportunity to do that. So, again, I will stop now. I apologize for taking up so much time, but I do want to hear my responses from my colleagues.
Vice Mayor Farmer?
So before I ask a few questions, and I have a lot of questions, so what I'll do is I'll ask a few, and then I'll let some of my colleagues go, just so we can be fair. But I'd like to make a statement first off. Just like Rich said, we've been on this council for 8 months now, counting to see December 5th, about 8 months. And the last thing that we wanted to do was come on the council and have to clean up this huge mess. I felt like somebody handed me a box of hand grenades and said, "Welcome to the city council. Here you go." And we're going to pull the pin on them too, by the way. It's a mess right here, but I want you to know, there's a lot of people that may be watching this that are just now getting involved and paying attention, and I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see new faces asking public questions at public comment, and seeing people online, even though there's a lot of misinformation floating around. It is generally good to see a lot of people, genuinely concerned with what's going on, and unfortunately, it takes a mess like this to get people to kind of perk their interest. We have a lot of people sitting up here, especially staff, that were not here when a lot of this happened. So I gave somebody a good analogy the other day. I said it's like, the city of Galt had partied very hard for a long time and just blew money like it was no big thing. And now we have the hotel bill and the trashed hotel room to deal with, okay? So it's not gonna be easy. And what we didn't wanna do is sit up here for the first 6 months of our term and decide how to vote on the lesser of two evils. There's all kinds of great things that I would love to start doing for the community, and all that has taken a back seat. And instead, we're doing this. And it sucks, to be frank. A lot of good comments tonight, a lot of things that were mentioned that we are doing. We are looking at lots of things to do for revenue. There's a lot of ideas being thrown around. Unfortunately, nothing happens really fast, and it all takes time. As a business owner myself, when things are not going well and you're struggling, the first thing you look at is your overhead. That's the very first thing, because the fastest thing you can affect. And then you try to figure out, how can I make more money, or what can I do to make my business more profitable? So what we're doing here is initially is doing those things. Where can we make the cuts that it's going to least affect the citizens of Galt? And everything is important to everybody. Everything. I mean, 3 weeks ago, I sat up here and fought and had, dialogue about protecting, us raising the fees on sports, sports, youth sports. We raised the fees on a lot of other things, but, I fought for that. But for me, I have to pick battles sometimes, and to pick a certain battle there means I have to give a concession somewhere else. The concession I gave by fighting that fight was to agree to the landscape that we did. It's saving $140,000, and that doesn't include water. I mean, the Parks and Rec department alone uses about $230,000 in water a year. It's not all landscaping, but that's a huge chunk. So I don't know how much of that is being saved in water, but there's a big savings there. $140,000 is a huge chunk right out of that $1.2 million deficit that we have. It was a hard decision, and I want to say too that we are in the middle of transitioning to that new landscape contractor, so we are undergoing a big gap here, and so that's why things look really bad right now. Mr. Solis has been trying to go out and do some things he mentioned, but he's also been trying to work with the new contractor to prioritize, saying, okay, no, this is more important than that. Let's start here and try to do that, but it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I've been in dialogue with Mr. Solis probably almost every single day, either by a text or an email or in person, and with city manager about these issues that we're seeing about the watering and the landscaping, to find out what's going on. And the answers I'm getting is we're working on it, and we're trying to, so we have to give them a little bit of time to try to get things in motion and get that done. So I just want to put that statement out there. A lot of what you guys said is things we are thinking about. And you're right, Parks and Recreation is the one department that people see the most. It's the sports, it's the parks, it's what makes our city look as good as it did. And I've lived here my whole life. And my family's like 4 generations from Galt. You think that I want to see up here and see these parks like this? I spent 3 hours the other day myself weed eating and cleaning up the 2 sides of the street in Old Town where my business is. I did that on my own time. So I get it. And I understand the participation that people are offering. And Mr. Haglund and I had this conversation, and we've actually, and I had it with Mr. Solis, we are looking at ways that the citizens can get involved. We're actively looking into that right now, because I think it's a great idea for stakeholders in the community to want to participate. I love to see people say, hey, I want to help. I got some tools. I got a couple guys will come out. We'll help with the park. I think there's some ways we can work something out, and so we're looking at that. Hopefully we can come up with something very soon. Rich made a good comment about Cardinal Glass. It made me think of an idea that we had a long time ago. Why not reach out to a company like that and say, Cardinal Glass, maybe you would like to sponsor the sports complex, just like AT&T sponsors Giant Stadium or whoever sponsors it now. Maybe say, well, we can call it Cardinal Field for a year, and you can pay for all the maintenance on it. I mean, I think there's lots of options out there to do. So we're going to be looking at all that stuff. So with that being said, that statement, I just had one question, and then I'll move on to the rest, and then I can come back to my other questions. So first question is, can somebody explain to me how it costs $60,000 to run a concession stand in personnel? Because if you paid someone $14 an hour at 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, would only be $30,000. So how does $60,000 in personnel?
So you have, there's more than one person in that concession stand. We're open on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. We're making money on the weekends on our tournaments. Where we're losing money is when we're open during the week for our men's leagues, for our softball leagues. We're not even covering costs. We're open as a convenience to our citizens.
Let him finish.
I'll answer to the crowd since that's what they want. We have been directed in the past, we stay open for convenience, okay? Until we're in this position that we are in now, are you willing to allow me to close the concession stand? If I wanted to close that concession stand 5 years ago, you guys would have looked at me and said, you're crazy. What about our citizens? What are we gonna do for them? They need a soda when they go out there and play. That's the difference between 5 years ago and today.
Well, as someone who does play sports, I do know that a lot of my fellow players will bring their kids, and the kids go to the concession stand, and I know it is nice to have it. And I know the pool, doesn't have a concession stand anymore, and I've heard a lot of people complaining that it's not there anymore. But I think that, like what Rich was saying, we need to look at some other ways to have somebody maybe come in and privately run it, and maybe with maybe a percentage to the city or something. But yeah, it's something we'll definitely look at. I just was curious about the revenue cost. So I'll wait for other questions and go on to Councilman Sandu.
Sandu, can could Claire answer the question first?
I also wanted to mention that's not just salaries, that's all the costs.
Refrigerator, machine.
First personnel costs was 60,000. Did say that, so.
So first of all, I would like to thank you, Mr. Hagland, give us a brief on the deficit, our budget. That's very important for everybody in this business, my own business, or everybody's house. This is the, since I'm same thing in new council, since I came in council, I did heard this city, I never heard before. And the other thing is, I was looking at all these reports. I think the main problem, the biggest problem we have, we revenue from the flea market. My question is, the revenue from the flea market is not just 2019. It was down from, if you look up on 2015. Why somebody don't take care? Why somebody don't make a good plan for the 5-year advance? Why we have to deal with today? Every business is a plan, but you don't look up that year, you are a deficit. Right now, we are a $4.1 million in a deficit. Why we don't look at within 2015 so we can increase the revenue, so we can decrease the expensive. Our most expensive, we all know from the utilities, from the employees, or from the insurance and all these. But I'm not talking about you guys don't control the expensive, but when we see the deficit just started, we need to action is the same time, not take the action after 4 years. But I certainly see now the problem is, I don't have any question on this one, but I certainly take it 3 weeks. And all these cuts, it can be effect on the community. But I was thinking, as a city council, we don't have a choice. We have to make a budget. And then I certainly will look up line by line where we can cut and where we cannot. But I'm talking about like in 4.1 billion. We need to, and in the future, we need to make a plan to increase our revenue. We have to make a plan to decrease our expenses. That's very simple. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you, Councilmember Sandu. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for, especially Mr. Solis, for putting all this together. This stuff is not easy. Since this is a lot of the public's first budget meeting, we had one previously that was on the other cuts, the police department, public works. Every department was asked to make some cuts. So we're not just looking at cutting Parks and Rec, just as a FYI for that. I really like Mr. Brossman's suggestions, and we're looking, as we look for a new city manager, we're looking for a more community-minded city and city manager that probably would appreciate some things like that. I know we have gone out and picked up garbage, and some people have done some weed eating while we've been out with that. And, if the citizens kind of pitch in and help out, we can get through this. We kind of got in this position because we were previous councils, and it goes back a long way, but we were banking on growth. And a lot of times you hear we're growing. Why are we having these financial problems? We're about seven years now behind our growth plan. We had 39 homes built last year, which is not very many at all. So we're not going to look to what we don't have and budget that. And that's kind of how we got in this position. So hopefully there's a lot of stuff on the horizon, and a lot of people out there complain about everything that's out there on the horizon. But since I've been on council, there hasn't been a lot built. It's out there, but it takes a while. It's not, let's see. I would also like to figure out why it costs so much to run the market. Maybe just look at the breakdown of the expenses on that, but or we can post it online. And then, so someone has talked about, probably Mr. Brossman again, about exploring issues and exploring things. And the council is exploring some things, but when we explore, we get a lot of backlash. We're looking to do some things to bring in some income because the market's dwindling. Like the Lewis Group, if any of you are watching, we're looking into that and if that income would help. Because the market, that's going to probably take 10 to 15 years. And just think how the market's going to go in 10 to 15 years. I used to go out to that market when I first moved to town, probably twice a month. How many of you go out to the market twice a month anymore? We got a couple, maybe for fruits and vegetables, but I do. But I'm not getting the purses and the things. So we've really got to look at how it's growing. And with Amazon, you don't even pay for shipping. So, you know, why leave your house? So just kind of bear with us, and we really appreciate all the ideas that everyone has, and we appreciate the input. And how much are we saving, or how much does it cost?
How much, well, I'd like to know how much we're saving, because hopefully we're not spending $467,000 for once a month. $10,000 a week.
Yeah. Claire, can you answer that?
The total savings on that contract was $141,000, almost $142,000, and it's spread amongst all of the streetscapes, open areas, and parks.
Correct.
So we had a contractor that we had a contract with for $500,000 a year to do all of the maintenance on the landscape, and they had the option to renew for one more year. And so Mr. Solis, Director Solis, is like, "Are we renewing?" And what did they say?
No, that it wasn't worth their effort for the money they were making.
Right. So for the whole city.
Go ahead.
It's for the whole city, though, the 500,000. So the contractor that does Lincoln Way.
East lighting and landscape over here that we pay for, specifically for our corridor, is for the entire city?
No.
No.
The Carillion Boulevard corridor cost of water and landscaping is $35,263 a year.
Okay, some of the stuff that you had listed as being done was never done. There was no water, no maintaining of vegetation, nothing. Instead, all we do is walk along and pull a dead.
Well, it's receiving, it used to be weekly.
Well, that on Trafalgar there.
Yeah. And now it's once a month.
Yeah, we need you guys to come to the podium if you want to talk.
My name is Stella Denton, and I live in the Northeast area, and that area has always taken great pride in how we take care of our lawns, how we take care of our houses, how we take care of all the maintenance and everything that we have. And people have always been, that area has always been sought after to purchase homes. And I know other areas are doing the same thing. What we see going on with Carillion and Walnut, like we said, breaks our heart, because we do have people that are coming to look at these new homes behind us, and if they see what's going on over here, they're not going to want to purchase. So we're putting in a lot of things over there for them that we have, that there's not going to be any water to water them. And we've always had such pride in when people come and they see and they say, oh, look how beautiful it looks in the fall. Look how nice everything is. That's what attracts people. So when they come and see brown lawns and dying things, it's not going to be the same, talk about Galt. I mean, it's going to be that, it's really going down the tubes. And that's what we really want to avoid, that it's not let go too long, because with this heat, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the most, we'll have all dead lawns. Then what's going to happen? You won't have the money to replace it. I mean, it's just, to us, it seems like common sense that things need to be put in place so it doesn't happen as fast as it's happening. Because that will discourage other people in the areas to even water. Why bother? So, I mean, we take it really serious. We've been here a long time. We love Galt. We'd like to see it stay to the standard that it is. And I know we're in a situation, but cutting the water and making everything look dead and making our town look like we don't care, I don't feel is the way to go. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And once again, if something really is seriously not getting water, please put it on the Galt app, because we've been finding a lot of broken sprinkler heads. Let me have the council finish before we take any more public comment.
I was just going to reiterate a lot of what has already been stated, and that, this report, at least this analysis, gives us a lot to think about. There are going to be some tough decisions to be made. And I appreciate staff's efforts and the public's willingness to also participate.
I had a specific question about, so I was just kind of, so Tom, you had told me a couple meetings ago that if we hadn't had the market, that the landscape of Galt, meaning how many parks and things we have, would be a lot different than what it is. Basically, the conversation was that Galt got really comfortable with how much money the flea market was making, and so we just built a lot. I mean, we have 20 parks, and Lodi has 28 parks, and Lodi has 70,000 people, and so that gives people a perspective on how much land we have that we have to maintain. But my question is that if we didn't have a market, let's just say there was no market, would you say, and I know you're good at giving long descriptive answers, but you can keep it brief if you want.
You're asking me to keep something brief?
Mr. Haglund said this meeting is for questions, so there will be questions. I would be doing a disservice
teasing.
if I wasn't asking questions.
No, long. Long question.
If we didn't have a flea market, would we not have a Parks and Rec program? I mean, essentially.
So here's how I think you should look at that, because it is a good question. And there was a speaker earlier that talked about the market and that we distinguish ourselves from probably any other city in California because we have the market and it generates income. And when I previously worked for this city back in the early 90s, when I arrived, the market was making $1.4 million a year. And when I left, 2.5 years later, we had increased market revenues to $2.1 million a year. It was a $700,000 increase. And I believe the general fund back then was $6 million. Today, it's more than double that. And so it was possible during a time, obviously, to increase the revenue at the market. That's what we did. And yet, I've been gone for a very, very long time, over 20 years, and the world has changed. And so what's contributing to that decline is a whole series of things that are probably both retail-oriented and internet-oriented. But it did provide a lot of money. And take that away. Pretend for just a moment that it didn't ever exist. We'd probably have today a recreation program that is, and facilities that are far fewer facilities than we ever had, and any facilities and programming would probably live, I think it's reasonable to say, within maybe a $1.2 to $1.5 million budget.
The contribution that the
Right.
general fund makes, because that's
Yeah,
what other cities
yeah.
are doing.
But, you know, it's just because that's the reality. I wish I could figure out a way to come up with different, or more money, but it's.
So I was just what I was trying to get at is, we're chipping in 1.2 million, well, we will be this year, was 1.4 last, but, you know, that's typically, like I was looking at Lodi's budget for a comparison. So Lodi contributes $3.8 million to their Parks and Rec. The revenue of the Parks and Rec in general is like over $6 million, but the general fund chips in 3.8. So they're chipping in 3.8. So if you do a comparison per capita with Galt, basically Lodi's basically chipping in $64 per capita.
Per person.
We're only chipping in 46. So even though we're chipping in 1.2 million, we're only chipping in 46 per capita. They're chipping 64. So relatively, we're still not doing really bad by putting in the 1.2. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't afford it based on our budget. I mean, again, we have too many facilities, parks, and now we're struggling to maintain. We have the lighting landscape, which is adding into that. But I just wanted to share that analogy, that comparison there. I just feel, again, some people spoke. You know, by cutting things in Parks and Recreation, I take very seriously, because this, to me, is asking the public to give. And I think what we need to find here when we do these cuts is a balance. There needs to be a give from the city, there needs to be a give from the people, and it needs to be fair. And what I'm seeing is that Parks and Recreation kind of tends to be singled out as like, the reason that we're just doing so bad is because the flea market's not doing as well. And I know somebody mentioned earlier that, you know, there's always the word saying, well, the general fund subsidizes the market. The correct phrase would be that the market subsidizes Parks and Recreation, because that's really what it should be said. And so I'm not saying that there's, you know, there's not things, we need to look at every little line item, like my colleague here said, and look at each little thing and see what we can do. But I think generally, and this whole Amazon internet thing, look, I hear that all the time. I'm actually, frankly, like, kind of tired of hearing it, honestly. No offense to anybody that says it, but I go to markets. I go to the Antique Fair in Sacramento. I go to the Lodi Street Fair, which does really well. I think what's happened is our market is, the way our market is, it's just become complacent. It's the concept of our market and the type of vendors we have are just not relevant. It's not that people's spending habit. Look, people don't go to the Galt flea market to buy something they buy online. When they go online, you go to Amazon, you go there specifically looking to buy one thing, and you buy it, and you have it shipped to your door. When you go to a flea market, you're like, you don't know what you're wanting to buy until you see it. You go, oh, look at that, that's great, I'm gonna buy that for my friend. Or, hey, let's go have coffee and walk the market, Paul. It's, you know, it's a social thing. That's what flea markets are now. The Galt market has kind of evolved away from that, and it's not like the market like it was when I was a kid and grew up around the market. So I think I embrace the ideas that, you know, Solis and his staff are coming up with. It's a slow process. I know they're trying new things. I would like to see it happen faster. But I wish, like Paul said, we would have started thinking about these, you know, years and years and years ago. But, you know, but that's, you know, hindsight now. But I think that, you know, I don't want to see the ripcord pulled in the market. The market, as our city manager said, makes more money than all our sales tax together. So it's a very lucrative source of money. But we just need to figure out how to live within our means, and then we can start looking at, you know, revenue to try to enhance that. And so Parks and Rec is important to me, if everybody's listening, and I am going to be picking through this with a very fine-tooth comb, and I promise that we will, you know, think very carefully, but all of us will, for when we make these decisions. These are not just something we just go, oh yeah, let's just chop that, no big deal. So that's my next question. I don't know if somebody else wants to.
I'll give my time to you.
Mayor.
Mr. Haglund?
All those things you just said, Vice Mayor Farmer, that's fine. I can agree in principle on all of those things. But notwithstanding how other cities might, or what other cities might contribute to their Parks and Rec, I think you know, we have to look at all of this holistically. One of the first slides first few slides that I went over talked about that Parks and Rec was asked, like all the other departments, especially all the other general fund departments, I should specify, at 10 and 20% cuts. And I had a slide up that said that Parks and Rec was asked to do the same thing, and that 10% cuts, excluding market expenditures and central services, amounted to about $265,000, 20% cuts, $530,000. But that if we were to cut the entire deficit as that the Parks and Rec Fund runs of 1.2 million, it would require a 46% cut. And I also commented that that's why all the other departments have been asked, because I'm not sure that 46% cuts are realistic. And yet, the overarching reality is that none of that matters if we don't figure out a way to bring our budget into balance. A city can give $1 to the general fund, or they can give all of their general fund money but $1 or to the Parks and Rec Fund, or they can give all their general fund money but $1 to the Parks and Rec Fund if they want to. That's a choice and a policy determination that the council would ultimately make. Whether you give Parks and Rec $1 or all the dollars, that's your policy. But in this city, the practical reality is that whatever the level of funding truly from general fund dollars, those that aren't restricted, and remember, our market revenues are restricted solely for Parks and Recreation. And because of that restriction, it largely fed a Parks and Recreation program. When I was last here, $2.1 million was in support of a $6 million general fund. $2.1 million was in support of a $6 million general fund. That was accounted for a third of general fund money. And so now we've grown, we've spent all that. That's all fine and good, but we have to now figure out a way, regardless of what we send over from the general fund, we have to figure out a way to save the general fund from going insolvent. And where those cuts come from and how they're made, I will provide to this council as good of a recommendation as I can based on my years in this business and having been with two other agencies in a situation where, interestingly, each time I walk in, those were two agencies where I walked in the door and everything was falling down around them. And so I've been through this. Fortunately, in the agencies I was at where that didn't occur, I never proposed a deficit budget, ever. Not one time, not a single time, ever, never, not one time. Because it was too important to be able to maintain the funds of that city, especially the general fund, in a way where it could continue to operate to pay the bills so that our public or the public in those communities didn't have to face this. Now, one of the cities was as a result of the Great Recession, and every city, every county, every government across the fruited plain had a problem balancing its budgets. And so the challenge for this council is going to be to take and consider the information that's provided to it on August 27th. You can switch it up any way you want. We can stake out positions from here until the cows come home. But in the end, decisions have to be made that balance the budget. Otherwise, this meeting is going to be mere child's play in a couple years when the city doesn't have cash flow to meet its expenses, has to make cuts far in excess of where they're at now, and even harder decisions have to be made. So you're right. You're absolutely right. We can figure out how to describe and how to position how much money should go into Parks and Rec, or if Parks and Rec should be self-supporting. That's a policy decision of the City Council. It always has been. It always will be. But we do need to realize that in making those policy decisions in one area, it pushes that another policy decision out in another area where we just gotta we got to live within our means. It's like your budget and my budget at home.
No, I understand completely. I was just stating the fact that, like I said before, it's a give and take between the people and the city. And I'm just gonna, throw out the elephant in the room that I've been getting a lot of people texting me about and emailing me. They haven't heard us talk one time about wages. We gave raises out last July. I stood right there at that podium and I argued against it. And that's before I knew we were in a budget deficit. I sat right there and argued about it. And I probably, hurt some feelings in the room. But I'm just saying, there's a give and take. So there's things we need to look at. I mean, I'm not sitting here advocating for, giving pink slips to city employees. But like Mr. Brossman, I think, said, when we don't give out raises when we're $4 million heading towards bankruptcy. You just don't. Unfortunately, our previous city manager and our previous finance director were not as sharp as y'all, and they pitched that to the council, and it was a decision, and I know my fellow council members that made that decision are very upset the fact that they were, presented that by their city manager. I mean, I think they would probably go back. They would maybe second guess that because but we rely heavily on when you depend on two department heads to give you a recommendation and you think, oh, we're in great financial standing. Money's, just growing on trees. We can do whatever we want. And so now we're all here in this situation. And so it's a give and take. And so I understand. And again, tough choices. One thing, can you elaborate that you didn't touch on with the lighting landscapes is you explained all the lighting landscapes situation, Tom, but can you explain just so the public can understand, what are some of the options that we have or could be presented to us to solve that particular problem? What are some of the options out there?
So in answering that, let me just provide a disclaimer. These are options, not tonight recommendations. And so this isn't advocacy. This is merely trying to respond to a question from one of my council members. So the options available to the city, let's take the two LLDs that don't have any sort of inflator associated with them. Those are governed by Proposition 218, approved by the voters in 1996. Largely seen, I agree, sir, as a good thing. So I don't again, not advocating one way or another, but nonetheless, that Prop 218 provides a limitation as to how fees like that can be increased. And here's what has to happen. If we wanted to update the fee to meet the current costs of rendering the service in those two L&Ls, and we wanted to add an inflator, we would have to hold essentially a property owner vote under 218. And we would send out, and it's not a vote like at the polling place or anything like that. It operates for just the property owners within that district. And you send out a letter that explains that you are wanting to update the fees, that you want to include the inflator, annual inflator. You are explaining the costs of the LLD, what it takes to provide the service in terms of expense, what the city proposes to take in terms of revenue. And in that format, it has to go out to all the property owners who would be subject to the fee. And this letter, they have to vote in the letter, and 50% of the property owners who receive that have to return it, plus one more, saying yes. And so, for instance, that's a high bar. That's a really high bar. And it operates that way because the fundamentals of the district are changing. And so the fundamental costs, you're really altering it. You're creating something different than what it originally was. And so that's one. The other would be that the city could do something similar under a community facilities district. Perhaps it would cover the entire city, but still you have a similar type, if you're starting it up, and you still have to do a similar type of vote. And the high bar of getting 50% to even return the mailed out ballot, let alone 50% plus one more to vote in the affirmative, is very, very difficult. But that's the law, and that's what we would have to do. So that's one option. Another option, and I say that this is an option, but I haven't studied it enough as it relates to Galt to know whether or not it would work or raise enough money. But one option would be to consider a parcel tax that would operate and apply throughout the community generally. And that type of a tax, I think Lodi in a recent election approved a parcel tax. But in that type of thing, you define the program, what the monies would be utilized for. It is, and what, you know, what the expenses are. You would state your case for why the council would vote to have that placed on a general election ballot. And it has to be on a general election ballot at a time in which council members are up for re-election. It's one of the election code requirements. And so you would, in theory, be able to articulate to the voters what the parcel tax amount would be, and you're obviously trying to gauge it so that it would bring in enough money to cover the cost of, say, lighting and landscaping throughout the city in all its areas. And then the idea would then be to dissolve the lighting landscape districts because you've replaced them with some other funding mechanism. What I don't know at this point is total assessed value, what the total cost would have to be per property owner. It would only require, it would require a 67%, 66.67% vote of all the voters. So it's a high bar, but it's all those that turn out for the election as opposed to just the property owners. Those are at least two options.
So in theory, we've talked about this. So if you have, like, roughly, I know it depends on residents versus general, but if you look at the map, let's just say it's 50%. 50% are paying into an L&L and 50% are not. Let's just say that. I mean, the ratio is probably different than that, but so in theory, if it takes X amount of dollars to service the city and all that money is being paid, whether it's from the general fund or it's coming from lighting and landscapes that don't chip in enough because of the reasons you stated, if we were to do something citywide, in theory, you'd be cost averaging. So people that are not paying, of course, like me, I don't live in a lighting landscape. I'm in this weird little area on the west side that just doesn't have one. I don't know why, but if I was saying, well, I think it's fair that I pay on one, actually people that pay already could theoretically see a cost reduction because you're spreading the cost out amongst everyone. So it's more like everybody pays fair share compared to, right? Or is it still distributed heavily based on districts and stuff?
So assessment districts are a little bit different because they're set up usually by zones. It's a weighted ballot based on the size of the parcel and various factors. You have an engineer's report that looks at the special benefits. That's the most difficult part post-Prop 218 is that what is truly a special benefit. So you have to look at what's a special benefit to that parcel. That's why often you'll have different assessment areas, and that's why it doesn't quite work like where it's spread out evenly over all
So
voters.
someone that
You
had
pick
a
up
really
one.
large lot in town could technically be paying more money than someone who has a small lot, but the person with a small lot could have a lot of parks and landscape around his neighborhood, and he'd be benefiting from that money more than the person with the big lot.
That's the purpose of the engineer's report, is to determine what is a special benefit. So then they assess how much of the park is a special benefit to that neighborhood. And so often, you can't have one assessment district in zones. I think Councilmember Lozano has experience in this area.
Can I weigh in just a little bit? The previous board that I served on, the citizens came to the board requesting this type of action happen, a vote for the lighting landscape. And the easiest way for me to think about it is think about a geographical area. And now let's use the Northeast Lighting and Landscape District as an example. You have the community park there, which serves the entire community. And then you have neighborhood parks, such as Lake Canyon, all the neighborhood parks, and then you have the actual landscape corridors. those all service the northeast area. The community park services everybody. So the west side and the number 3 would put in a percentage of their revenue, and I'm just going to throw a number out, 5% of what they bring in into their benefit zone goes to help with the community park. Same with the flea market grounds, if that was in a benefit zone, and the same with large community areas. So think of it more as a geographical area, and the residents in that area split the costs. Let's say there's 800 homes. They split the costs that it's going to take to maintain their community, neighborhood parks, and landscape corridors for 10 or 15 years out. So when Kimberly talks about an engineer's report, there's a lot that goes into it. It's just not, oh, well, employee costs are going to be this 20 years down the road, and cost of fertilizer is going to be this and that. There's a scientific way they figure it out, because you don't want to go through this process and then 5 years later say we're broke. So it has to be done very specifically. And I'll tell you, Mr. Hagelin's correct in that, we had a couple of benefit zones that passed with flying colors. And, the community really was interested in having that increased service level in their area up in this specific parts of Elk Grove. But then there were other areas that there was a lot of community involvement. People went out knocking on doors and saying, hey, we really believe that we should do this. And the vote came back and it didn't pass. It didn't get 50% plus 1. So it's something that I certainly, I like living in a nice community. I think a couple people spoke tonight about the northeast area where I live. And it does pain me to see Carilion the way it is. But at some point, we're going to have to do something different. And so if the community comes together and says, hey, we want to do this, I believe legally, it's really the choice of the council to put the Prop 218 process into motion. But I certainly wouldn't do it as one council member. I would be very cautious and make sure that we had some kind of informal surveys or maybe it was petitions support, because it does cost money to put those together, and you want to make sure that it's going to be as successful as it can. So that's just my 2 cents on it. And I just want to make one other point that I haven't heard tonight is these lighting and landscape districts, the money collected in those districts outside of the money that's used for the district or the citywide parks, the money outside of that has to be spent in that district. So you can't take money from the west side and spend it on the northeast side. I didn't hear that tonight, and I just wanted to point that out, because if you look at the slide that had that, although unsustainable over time, and it does have an escalator, number 3 has a $62,000
fund balance.
Yeah, for capital. And that's the other thing. You have to think about it as this is a fund that really looks at capital improvement over time, too. We have some parks that have slides and play equipment that can't be replaced. What was all installed 20 years ago or so, or right around there, and that's about the lifespan of some of that stuff. And so you really have to put away for replacement of facilities. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. So there's a lot of questions about.
So it's more or less
lighting
we just
landscape.
dissolving so it almost sounds like you just dissolve an LOD and then you call it something different, because you said it's the district all chips in and they split the cost. Well, that's what they're doing now, but it's just, but the cost is not. The cost was fixed back when, and now it can't be changed. So you're basically dissolving that and creating something. It's essentially the same thing.
Well, you would be, in that case, in the first case I think I described, you'd be modifying the LLD. It wouldn't be dissolved, but it would just be modified.
That a really important question somebody just sent to me, which they were hearing what we're talking about, and they said, was something like that, a partial tax that we were talking about, where it'd be by district. What about people that own property that don't live in town that can't vote right now, like in a regular election? Would they be allowed to vote on that as part of the property owner? So you would essentially have people voting on behalf of people that own property and can't vote?
You're talking about the
Parcel tax? No.
No, they would not vote.
They would
It's
not.
the electors.
Yeah.
So you have more flexibility with the tax in the sense that you don't have the engineer's report and the weighted ballots, and that it's a straight vote, goes on the ballot. It's your city electors, they're the same people that are allowed to vote on the city council. It's at the same election, so it follows that same process.
But but I'm referring to the one where you said the engineers come in and look at it
The
per parcel and all
LLDs
that.
are the property owners.
Property
It's a
owners,
property-
not residents, it's owners, property owners.
Property
So
owners.
that would be property owners.
Yes. Yes.
You would vote, they would vote for that. I mean,
Correct.
That was that, okay. Just wanted to clarify that. People were asking about that, so. Okay, so I mean, if we don't do anything though, we have to do something. One of these choices has to be something. We just, because the lighting, they're just gonna keep going.
No, and that was what I was referring to in one of my opening slides. It might be the third or fourth slide where I talk about, we have short-term decisions to make. Tonight was about talking about short-term decisions, things you can do without having to take any additional time. Midterm decisions, as I highlighted, would come over a period of time, 6, 12, 15, 24 months, something like that. And it would continue to look at means and methods by which the city could consolidate, but take a far greater period of either analysis or as relates to employee costs, working with, within the union environment, whatever it is. But those are midterm. And then, of course, long-term, these revenue enhancements. One of the reasons why most of the revenue falls into long-term is, not all, but most, is, especially if you're going out on a general election ballot. Well, it's long-term because you can't do that for the next year and a half. But there's a lot of work to be done over the course of the next year and a half if you were to do that, to consider something like that.
But I still have some public comment.
Oh, go ahead.
He wanted a closing statement. Do you want to come to the, we need to come to the podium because the people, it's on video, so
Yeah,
if
I
we
get
start
it.
answering, they're going, what are they talking about?
I get it. I haven't heard any talk of this, and I'm hoping my question is totally redundant and it's already in the works.
Can you state your name, please?
Roberta Robbins.
Thank you.
Water treatment dumps, wastewater treatment dumps over 2 million gallons of water a day back into the creek. Why aren't we having the infrastructure to use that for our watering, our lighting and landscaping in our parks? Sean gave me an idea that it's, I don't know if that's a month or a year, that over $200,000 savings. There might be state and federal grants. I know the infrastructure is not there for the purple piping, but that's something that really needs to be worked on.
That's a great idea.
The 230,000 was what Parks and Rec uses over the year. That's not just sprinkler water. I don't know the percentage breakdown on that because some buildings that have sprinklers also run the same meter as their restrooms and their sinks and things like that. So, but I'm just letting you know that Parks and Recreation as a department uses about 230,000 in water. I mean, maybe it's only 30,000 in sprinkler water.
Well,
I don't
and then
know,
so
but it's
lighting
something.
and landscaping would be even more if this infrastructure was put into place. That can be used as
you have-
irrigation water.
Do you have any comment on that, Mike?
We just had a tour of the plant, and he actually explained that to us.
Yeah, the lady basically touched on it. There is no infrastructure as far as the purple pipe to basically distribute the water from the treatment plant back. It has to be a totally separate piping system. And so the cost of that, as you can imagine, is going to be pretty significant, so.
But I'm wondering if there's state or federal grants but, I mean, it's something that's long-term that's a huge savings.
How about a water truck?
They did that in one city during the drought. You could come and fill up at their I don't remember what city it was, but you could come and fill up your water truck or whatever for free.
Wow.
But they can put the infrastructure in place to use that for long-term regular watering. And I think that's really forward-thinking. Oh, and I think LEDs should go in too. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there more public comment?
Yeah, thank you.
Is this Ms. McCune again?
It is, Ms.
Okay.
McCune again. I'm sorry. There's two things that were coming to mind as I'm listening to this, and one of them was the Galt market, and somebody had said, how many of you have been to the Galt market in the last, year? And I'm not one of those ones that raised my hand, and simply because I work. And so, you talk about the city of Lodi and having their
Farmers market.
street fair, their street fair, and it's on the weekend. And so, it'd be kind of interesting to look at the Galt market perspective of a weekend event, not necessarily every weekend, but maybe quarterly, where we could have a Galt market on the weekend where people that actually work during the week can attend. Because I would go.
That's a fantastic idea, and we just started that program.
Okay, great. Okay. And the other thing is partnershiping with organizations within our community. There's a lot of churches and stuff like that. I know firsthand that there's a lot of churches that go around and do park maintenance, once or twice a year. I think during this summer situation where right now it does look horrible, have we talked to some of the local churches and asked them, instead of doing like a park cleanup, which I think that's a good thing, but also helping with the medians and making those areas look nice, and possibly getting donations from the rock place here in Galt or other areas where we could actually put rock in where it's right now dead dirt and grass or whatever, and make it look nice without having to require additional watering and maintenance. It's just donations where these organizations can come in and help get those areas at least cleaned up right now until we get the budget in a better place, because it really does. Carillion in particular, I walk it every day, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, there's just tumbleweeds. It's half dead. It's not being watered. I'm sorry, the median's not being watered. The sides are being watered. The median's not. And I know firsthand because I walk it early in the morning, and it's not even moist. So if they are watering, somebody needs to go back and look at the irrigation and find out why we're not seeing water there. And maybe it is overgrowth. But then if we partnership with some of these churches and stuff like that and ask them, can you help us get it trimmed down to where the water can actually do its job, maybe we can start seeing something. Or like I said, look for donations for rock or something like that to fill in those medians to make it look nicer. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great ideas. Thank you so much. Ms. Weber, please take the podium.
My name's Gail Weber. I think most of you know me. Based on what, I just want to comment on what she said. Why ask the churches? Why doesn't the communities that live there do that? I mean, I work with several nonprofits. We put a lot into this community, and so do the churches. So why are we asking them to do more? If you live in that area on Carillion and stuff, and you don't like the weeds, and you don't like the fact that it's brown, or that's, why don't you do it yourself? Like I said, say, well, let's just ask another organization. How about taking some personal responsibility in your own neighborhoods and getting out there and cleaning up the park and pulling those weeds and stuff? I'm on the beautification committee. We go out and clean areas up once a month already. And I'm a volunteer that puts in a lot of time, and I don't have time to do more. And a lot of these other people don't either. We're already volunteering a lot. So the community needs to step up and start doing some of this. I mean, we can't do it all for everybody. And like I said, it's not fair to go to the churches and to the other nonprofits and say, okay, you know what? A lot of you already put in 20 hours a week. Why can't you give us 20 more? Take some personal responsibility and do it yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Weber.
I wanted to comment on that too. As I mentioned earlier, this is something we are looking at. We have some arrangements with some organizations now that help. For example, Galt Youth Baseball maintains Harvey Park to a certain point. And so this is something I said, Mr. Haglund and I have had this conversation, Mr. Solis and I had it. This is on the table, and I would encourage this, based on these comments, to maybe, I know you said we were looking into it, but I would like to maybe escalate that. There's a lot of people waiting in the wings. A lot of people are willing to help. And we think we can arrange something like that because we would like to see that. Mr. Solis mentioned something about maybe we could have an arrangement where we can have a community day where he could have a couple park staff out there overseeing a group of community people that came to their local park and did work on that park that Saturday. He said we could probably do something like that. So again, we just want to work out the details of it and see if that's whatever. But Mr. Haglund felt very optimistic that we could figure something like that out, and I think it's great because if we can do that, let's say we can adopt out more or less 5 parks. Well, then we can take our landscape people and they can focus more on maybe mowing more frequently instead of once a month or whatever on the other parks, or maybe we can reduce that cost down even more. We can do some stuff, so it gives us a lot of flexibility by the citizens chipping in, and they want to do it. And we hear you. I hear you online. I hear you that you guys want to help, and we're working on it. So I mean, it's coming. It's not falling on deaf ears. So I want to close out by just saying, last thing is appreciate everybody giving their input. The next meeting is the 27th. So, which is where we're gonna, 27th of August, where we're gonna be making some decisions at that point. And if you haven't heard ideas up here, just because the ones are presented by our staff, these are just ideas that have been presented. But us as council members, we listen to the people, we do our own research. I have a whole notebook here of ideas just for Parks and Recreation that maybe weren't presented tonight, that I think about ways we can, and those will all be coming out in August 27th. And we want to hear input because this is your community. We want to hear your ideas. I'd like to see less negativity and more like, this is what I think for an idea we can do, instead of, because that's really what we want, is we want your input. We're your elected officials. We work for you. We want to hear that. And we want to hear, together how we can make these decisions. So thank you, everybody that come tonight and made a comment. Appreciate it.
May I make a comment regarding the volunteer programs? Just so you know what we have in place, we're teaming with the FFA group here in town with the high schools. They're going to bring out a couple of buses. We're going to be working on some of the landscaped areas. We're going to be laying down some of the drip systems in some of these areas. We're going to be laying some of the bark to keep the weeds down. We're also teaming up with the Sacramento Sheriff's Department to have some of the volunteer pay off their fines in our programs to help some of the stuff we cut. So we're already starting these things already now. So I'd be glad to work with other groups to come up with projects like that we just need the hands to get that stuff
If
done.
someone wants to do that, could they contact you directly?
All my information's on the website.
On the website under Armando Solis?
Under
also?
Parks and Recreation,
Under
yeah.
Parks and Recreation, if anybody's watching on television or here in the meeting, if you're interested and you want to get involved with one of those, you can contact Mr. Solis and speak to him about that.
That's fantastic news. And considering we have the #1 FFA chapters in the state, they can really help you out a lot. That's absolutely fantastic. There's not really a spot for staff. Is there any staff that would like to make any comments before we close or leave? Is that a no? Yes?
I just have one comment, and that is I appreciate the community being involved. I appreciate the council listening and being very thoughtful with your questions and responses. I think this is a very important endeavor, and I do appreciate everyone's efforts. And of course, my staff.
Yes, thank you. All right, any other council members? I think a lot's been said. I don't have anything else. Mr. Sandhu? You good?
Thank you.
All right. Meeting adjourned.